Today we're diving into the replica world with this HPI E10 Michele Abbate Grrracing touring car. The Michele Abbate replica touring car is a 10 scale sized model based off of the E10 chassis, and it comes fully assembled and includes all of the items that you would need right out of the box. Aside from this replica body coming fully decked out like this with the paint and the decals, the model does include a TF41 HPI 2.4 gigahertz transmitter. In the package is also a 6-cell 7.2 2000 milliamp NiMH battery pack with a Tamiya connector, and there's also a wall battery charger with some international power adapters to suit different wall plugs. So this model really is ready to go out of the box. We'll just need to install the AA's and then charge the NiMH pack, and this thing could be driving on the street in no time, which is a pretty good deal when you consider that this model starts at about $200, including all of those items. And arguably, the best item in that package is our Michele Abbate replica body. Now, this touring car body is made of a two-piece Lexan design. It features a paint scheme and then lots of decals throughout. This entire hood piece is a decal. This window is another decal. On the top is another decal, and on the rear of our window here is another decal. This replica body has a lot of decals and just stimuli to look at. There is so much going on. Now, we don't have any hard plastic wipers or mirrors or anything like that. Those would probably break off pretty quickly on a model like this, but we do have this big hard plastic wing, which is mounted from underneath the body, holding in posts, and then the wing attaches to those posts from the top. On the side of the body and on the back of the body, a lot of these decals are individual decals. It's not one full wrap that has everything on one decal sheet. Some of the decal bunches, like this little bunch, would be one decal, but this is a separate decal, that's a separate, that's separate, that's separate, that's separate, that's separate, this is separate, this is separate. All these on the bottom are separate. Back here, these are separate. My point is that this body has so many decals on it to give it that replica look that it must have taken a lot of time, a lot of labor was applied to this body, and somebody having to manually apply each of those decals. This is a really nice body that somebody put a lot of time and work into. Now, here's a Michele Abbate that we pulled from her website of her standing next to her full-size vehicle. Now, we get a look at the back end of the model, but comparing it to this E10 replica touring car, you can see it's just polished so well, where our RC replica only features the addition of the HPI decal back there, and everything else is pretty dang solid to the original. If we take off the body and look at the chassis, we finally get to take a look at something we may have seen before. The E10 chassis from HPI has been around a while, and it is a pretty good value chassis. The layout in here is a tub chassis with a plastic center drive shaft supplying power to all four corners. We have front and rear differentials. We have this really simplistic, low maintenance layout. It's intended to be really easy to work on when you have to work on it, because hopefully you shouldn't. This front shock tower design, how the shocks are mounted, are pretty cool. It looked like a real automobile. You'll see our camber links are all solid. We also have this big foam bumper that's going to help absorb some of the impact in accidents and protect the front end of that body. Another thing on this model is we have coil over shocks on all four corners, and then to add more to the realism of this scale model, in behind the wheels, we have these realistic brake discs that spin with the wheel, and then the caliper remains stationary. Now, I don't know how well you guys can see that, but this is a Phillips head screw holding on this wheel. Now, this model does use 12mm hexes, and it includes a few different hexes in the kit if you want to change your offset. But the thing is, when you change and extend your offset, because we're using screws, you'll need to use a longer corresponding screw for that offset, and the manual goes through that. And speaking of Phillips, the model uses number 1 and number 2 Phillips screws throughout. There are some hexes used, but it's primarily Phillips, so you'll probably need a number 1 and number 2. For our electronics in this model, it uses all brushed electronics, and they are waterproof with the exception of the water-resistant servo. So you're okay to get these electronics wet, but I wouldn't get them too wet, and especially wouldn't submerge them in any water. The ESC though is the SC3S. It's a 2 and 3 cell compatible ESC, so you can use a LiPo with this model, and it features a Tamiya connector here. For LiPo batteries though in this model, because we have a tub chassis that has the recessed cell spots for an older NiMH, it is a little bit limiting on space for LiPos. So what you'll need is a LiPo that actually has curved edges to mimic a NiMH. This is the Gens Ace 4000 milliamp 2 cell. I'll put a link for this down below, but this works perfectly in tub chassis that have those cell recessions. We talked about this in the Tamiya Han Racing semi-truck a while back. This is the same battery pack. It just fits in this compartment really nice and easily, and it's a no fuss, no mess situation. Oh, and I almost forgot the coolest thing about the E10 chassis layout is it has a dual configuration going on inside the chassis here. So there's 2 setups. There is the grip setup and there's the drift setup. So it comes stock from the factory in the grip setup, which entails the motor being in the rear position. If you want to switch over into the drift setup, the motor takes on a forward position and it shifts some of the electronics, shifting the weight of the car and the layout. So in the manual, it actually says that you'll need to buy a couple of parts separately to complete that conversion. But when we unboxed our model, those few separate parts were included in this bag. So in terms of performance, what is this E10 like to drive? Well, it's like driving a 4-wheel drive touring car. There's no mystery or surprises there. It's a very controlled, stable experience. We first drove it here inside AMain Hobbies on our really low, high bite carpet. And with the stock tires, just as it is, and the car hooked up really well. There's lots and lots of traction and then lots of steering to go along with it. We found that in going along, you come up to a turn and you just let off the gas and the car would just hook right around really sharp, and then you could get back on the gas in the exit and the car was really balanced and hooked up really well. We also went outside and drove the E10, and unfortunately it had just started raining when we were going to go out and drive the model. We let a little time pass, that's why we drove it inside on the carpet, and then it did stop raining, but it was really slick outside. The traction wasn't as high. We drove it around and had a good time. Again, all the electronics are waterproof. That servo is water resistant. It all got wet, but nothing failed. Everything was as you would expect it to be. The battery pack we used though was an EcoPower. It's a 4200 milliamps, so we could get a little bit extra runtime out of the model, just to prolong the fun. Top speeds were probably 20 mile an hour, low 20s out there with that NiMH on that wet surface. But the E10 is a lot of fun to drive out there on the different surfaces. It kind of brought its own characteristics of how it was going to handle, but ultimately it was a really good time with that body just being gorgeous to look at, right? Now HPI has the motto, they call it, I found this in the manual, looks, performance, and value. And I thought that kind of really stuck well for this model because it does bring value at $200 with this really cool replica body and an electronics package that offers you nowhere to go but up. Thanks for watching this video, guys. If you have any questions or comments, please leave that for us down below. And if you want any more info, we'll have some links on everything we talked about down below. My name's Brett with AMain Hobbies. Thanks for watching. Burp, 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 burp.